What if the only person capable of saving an entire world was someone no one would ever look at twice? What if the seal of destiny was buried inside the most broken body imaginable, and the man inside it refused to quit? The last thing Alexe remembered from his old life was the sound of automatic fire, and a scream somewhere behind him. He was covering his unit's retreat on the outskirts of a ruined city, doing what operators do, staying behind so others could move forward. 3 rounds hit the vest. The 4th went lower. He fell onto the concrete and felt his body stop responding, not with agony, just with silence. Then there was nothing, not unconsciousness, not sleep, just nothing, like someone had switched the world off, and then the world switched back on. But it was not the same world. Alexe opened his eyes to a blue sky with clouds moving too slowly, the kind of sky that doesn't exist over bombed-out cities. He was lying in a ditch, dirty water up to his waist, the stench of rot and something sour pressing into his lungs. He tried to move. His body wouldn't obey him. Not like an injury. This was different, deeper. His body was enormous and heavy, as if sandbags had been piled across every limb. He looked at his hands. These were not his hands. Thick, stubby fingers, skin caked in dried mud and scrapes, nails broken down to the quick. He tried to clench a fist. His fingers barely bent. Panic rose in his throat, fast and hot. He crushed it immediately. 12 years in special forces had taught him one ironclad rule. Panic kills faster than a bullet. He lay in the ditch and breathed. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Every breath was a struggle, as if his lungs were being pressed inside of ice. He began to gather information the way he had been trained to do since before he could grow a beard. Foreign body, unfamiliar place. He was alive when he should be dead. So either this was a coma and hallucinations, or something had happened that he didn't yet understand. Either way, the first step was the same. Get up. He rolled onto his side. It took close to a minute. He braced both hands against the edge of the ditch and pushed. His body shifted a couple of centimeters. Again, another couple of centimeters. He struggled out of that ditch for nearly 10 minutes, and when he finally stumbled onto dry ground, he just lay there gasping. 2 people walked past. A man and a woman in rough tunics and leather vests, the clothes of another era entirely. The man glanced at him and said something to the woman. She hesitated. Alexe didn't understand the words, but he had spent enough time in enough countries to read tone without translation. Contempt, pure and uncomplicated. He had seen it in every city in the world. People who are considered garbage by the people around them. The body he had woken up in apparently belonged to one of them. He sat up slowly. His head was spinning. He looked himself over. The body was stocky, but not muscular, more like bloated, filled from the inside with something heavy and invisible. The clothes were rags, his feet were bare and caked in mud. Then he noticed something on his left wrist. A mark, a black pattern like a chain wrapping around the skin. 5 links, each one the size of a coin. He touched the mark. The skin was smooth. This was not a tattoo. It was part of the skin itself. The moment his finger touched the last link, light flashed, not outside, inside his head, like a screen turning on behind his eyes. A map, an entire continent, seen not with his eyes, but with some inner vision he had never possessed before. The continent was called Aldoria. He knew this the way you know your own name, without needing to be told. 5 points glowed on the map, red pulsating markers scattered across the edges of the continent. One in the south, one on the western coast, one in the northern mountains, one beyond the eastern desert, one deep underground at the center. Words appeared beneath the map, bearer of the usurper seal, objective, free the 5 priestesses. Links of the curse removed, 0 out of 5. He read it twice, then 3 times, then he closed his eyes and opened them again. The map hadn't gone anywhere. He was sitting in the mud by a road in a foreign world, inside a foreign body that weighed as much as 2 men and could barely move. And some system was telling him he had to free 5 hostages, scattered across the edges of a dying continent. He allowed himself exactly 1 second of despair. 1 second. Then the despair faded and the operator took over. He began to analyze. The body wasn't just heavy, it was bound. He could feel it now that he knew where to look. Not fat, not illness, something pressing from within, as if every muscle were wrapped in an invisible chain. 5 links on the wrist, 5 priestesses on the map. The connection was obvious. Each priestess was a single link. Saving her meant removing a link. Removing a link meant freeing the body. Simple, brutal, Perfect. Whoever designed this trap had chained the carrier to his own flesh, so he could never reach the very people he needed to save. There are hostages. There is a rescuer, but the rescuer cannot move. Alexe smiled. For 12 years, he had been pulling people out of places from which there is no return. Bunkers, mountain caves, buildings packed with armed men in every corridor. And every single time, before every single operation, the same feeling. The task is impossible. Resources are zero. Time is running out. Go anyway. He looked at the nearest marker on the inner map. South, a 10-day journey for a normal person. For him in this body, 3 weeks, maybe a month. He got to his feet slowly. His knees were shaking. His back ached. Every step sent a jolt of pain through his joints. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. On the 4th, he stopped to breathe. A cart rolled past. The driver didn't look his way. He moved on. The system showed a town half an hour's walk away for an average person. For him, half a day. He needed 3 things: food, water, information, the 3 requirements of any operation. He walked and thought. No weapons, no team, no communication. Just his head and 12 years of experience inside a body that could barely carry itself. He remembered something his first instructor had told him. An operator isn't the one who shoots best. An operator is the one who thinks when everyone else is shooting. Right now he couldn't shoot. He couldn't run. He couldn't even walk properly. But he could think. By evening he reached the city, low walls of gray stone, to guards at the gates. The city was called Cordon. He approached the gates. One guard grimaced and told the other that the hunchback had shown up again. Alexe understood the words. The language of this world was somehow comprehensible to him. Another ability tied to the seal. The guard stepped forward and shoved him in the chest with one hand. He stumbled back the full steps from what was barely a push. That was how weak this body was. The guard told him to get lost and stop scaring the merchants. Alexe studied the guard into seconds, sword hanging to low, scabbard strap frayed, left hand weaker than the right. Old habits, completely useless right now. He couldn't handle even a child in this body. He gave the guards a wide berth and slipped in through a gap where the wall had crumbled. Inside, he found the market by its smell and walked its length twice without a single coin to his name. On his 3rd pass, he noticed a torn sack of grain spilling into the dust at one stall. He crouched beside the merchant and began picking grain from the ground with slow, clumsy movements. At first the merchant moved to chase him off. Then he saw the vagrant was actually helping and let him stay. When the sack was patched up, the merchant tossed him a piece of stale bread. Alexe ate it in under a minute, hard and tasteless, but calories are calories. He sat against a wall and listened to the market around him. Prices, monsters multiplying in the south, harvest shrinking year by year, roads becoming impassable. The world was dying. He could hear it in every conversation. The land yielded less each season. Monsters grew more numerous. Cities were shrinking behind their walls, and no one knew why. But he knew. The 5 priestesses who sustained this world had been locked away for 1,000 years. And as long as they remained sealed in their dungeons, the world would keep withering away. He sat by the wall and watched the orange sun sink below the city walls. 5 markers burned in his mind. The nearest glowed in the south, and tomorrow the work would begin. He spent 3 days in Cordon, not resting, working. Every morning, he walked the market and traded labor for food. He carried boxes. He swept. He picked up trash. The work was agonizing. A box any porter could lift one-handed. He barely dragged along the ground using both. Merchants laughed. Children threw apple cores and clumps of dirt at him. He didn't react. He listened. Every conversation at the market, every rumor floating out of the tavern, he could only watch through the window. Every word that fell from the guards on the walls. On the 2nd day, he learned what he needed. South of the Greenvale Forest lay a place locals called the Black Mound, an old fortress built into a hill. No one had gone there in 200 years. Heroes and adventurers used to try. Not a single one returned. The locals said the mound was filled with underground creatures, stonehounds and something larger at the very bottom, something that never slept. He compared it to the map in his head. The priestess's marker glowed directly over it. Black Mound, that was where she was. On the 3rd day, he found an old man at the edge of the market selling worn maps of the area. He helped unload the man's cart, and in return was allowed to study one of the maps. He memorized the route in the time it took most people to fold a piece of paper. The road south went through the forest. The forest was dangerous, monsters, bandits. But there was a bypass trail along the western bank of the Tarn River, 2 days longer, safer. He chose the trail. He couldn't afford a fight. In this body, any fight was a death sentence. On the 4th day, before the guards had finished yawning, he slipped back out through the gap in the wall. Everything he owned, half a loaf of bread, a flask of water, a piece of rope, and an old rusty knife he had pulled from the trash behind the tavern. The knife was dull. It was also his only weapon. He stepped onto the road and turned south. He walked slowly because his body left him no other choice. After 1 hour, he was already gasping. After 2 hours, his legs gave out, and he sat on the roadside. He rested, drank in small sips, kept going. On the 1st day, he covered about 8 kilometers. For an operator, that was a morning jog. For this body, it was a feat. He sat during a rest stop and looked at his hands. He could feel the curse now. Not just heaviness, but something alive. Hundreds of invisible threads pulling at his muscles and bones from the inside. 5 links on his wrist glowed faintly in the twilight. He imagined the first one snapping, imagined his body drawing its first free breath. That thought pushed him forward. On the 2nd day of the journey, he followed the bypass trail toward the Tarn River. The path was narrow and overgrown. No one had walked it in a long time. He moved slowly, but he moved like an operator, marking cover positions, noting terrain traps, ravines, cliffs, narrow passes. Everything stored in memory, automatic, unstoppable. On the 3rd day, his first monster found him. It leaped from the riverbank bushes, the size of a large dog, black fur, yellow eyes. Something between a wolf and a lizard. He froze. The creature growled and charged. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. But he could think. He backed slowly toward the cliff edge. The creature followed. He stood at the very lip, river below, deep and fast. The creature lunged. He didn't jump back. He simply dropped straight down, collapsing to the ground like something mowed flat. His body didn't know how to jump, but it knew how to fall. The creature sailed over him and plunged into the river with a screech. The current took it away. He lay at the cliff's edge and breathed, hands shaking, heart hammering. First battle in the new world. Victory by a single trick. He got up and kept moving. On the 5th day, the bread ran out. On the 6th, the water. He found a stream and drank his fill. Found berry bushes, sour and tough, but edible. He gathered everything he could carry and kept going. The pain became more familiar each day. Not easier, just more familiar. Pain is just information. It tells you the body is working at its limit, and the limit can always be pushed. On the 10th day, the signs appeared. The earth grew darker. The grass withered. The trees bent crooked and sparse. Something was poisoning this land. Something radiating outward from the black mound. On the 12th day, he saw it. A hill on the horizon, black, not from stone, from something else. As if the earth itself had darkened around it. He stopped and sat down. He pulled everything he knew from memory and built a picture. Old fortress inside a hill, underground levels, stone hounds patrolling, something large deeper in, and somewhere at the bottom, Terra, priestess of the earth. He closed his eyes and entered planning mode. A direct assault was impossible. He could barely walk. Any monster would kill him with a single blow. So he had to bypass them, outsmart them, lure them into traps. He needed reconnaissance first. Numbers, patrol patterns, weak points, alternate entrances. He spent an entire day circling the hill in a wide arc, stopping every 100 meters, watching, memorizing. By evening, he had the complete picture. Main entrance from the north, a wide opening in the rock, 5 or 6 stone hounds patrolling constantly. Great creatures carved from living stone, fast and heavy. The western slope, steep, impassable. The eastern thicket, fewer creatures, but still guarded. And the south, a crack in the rock, narrow, very narrow. A person of average build would barely squeeze through. He absolutely could not fit through in his current form. But there was a draft from the crack, space inside, a potential entrance. The problem was simple and brutal. He was too wide. He sat beside the crack and thought. The curse wouldn't let his body shrink. But the crack could be widened. The rock around it was weathered and crumbling. If he worked quietly, if he didn't attract the creatures. He looked at his rusty knife, then at the rock, then back at the knife. Days of scraping stone with a dull blade inside a body that exhausted itself after 10 strokes. No other plan existed. He began to work, slow, methodical, bit by bit, crumb by crumb, chip by chip. He worked for an hour, rested for 2, worked again. At night he slept right against the crack, wrapped in rags. In the morning he continued. On the 3rd day of work, a large chunk broke from the edge. He froze and listened. Silence. The creatures hadn't heard him. He continued. By the 5th day, the crack was a hand's width wider. By the 7th, to hand's widths. He tried to squeeze through and got stuck halfway. 2 more days of work. On the 9th day, he squeezed through, skin scraped raw, shirt torn to ribbons. But he was inside. The tunnel was narrow and dark. He crawled forward on his stomach, his body barely fitting, inching through cold, wet stone. Every meter was a meter closer to the first link. After 30 meters, the tunnel widened enough for him to go on all fours. After 50, he could stand. Darkness absolute. He walked with one hand trailing the wall. Right? Always right. Old rule. In a maze, stick to one wall and sooner or later you find the exit, or the center. He needed the center. 10 minutes later, he heard the first sound. A tapping on stone. Fast, rhythmic. A stone hound. Somewhere ahead. He pressed flat against the wall and held his breath. The tapping grew closer, then receded. The creature had passed. He waited another minute and moved on. The tunnel forked. Chill from the left. Warmth from the right. He chose warmth. Warmth down below means something alive or something magical. 20 minutes of careful movement. He froze twice when he heard sounds. Hounds patrolling. 3 or 4 of them. He timed their rhythm. Approximately every 7 minutes, one passed by. A 7-minute window. He moved during those windows and waited through the rest. The tunnel opened into a large cave. He sensed the space by the echo of his own footsteps before he saw the light. Then green light from the walls, moss or something like moss, glowing softly. He could see now. The cave was the size of a church hall, ceiling high, walls glowing, and in the center stood the guardian, a golem, 3 meters tall, black stone the same color as the hill itself, arms like logs, a small, eyeless head, a symbol carved on its chest, something like a lock. The golem stood motionless, a statue, but he had no doubt it was alive. Behind the golem, a stone slab door bearing the same lock symbol. Behind that door, the priestess, the mark on his wrist pulsed warmly, confirming it. He crouched behind a rock ledge and began to think. The golem was massive and made of stone. He couldn't fight it, not in any body, so he needed a workaround, a distraction, or a key. He studied the cave from behind cover. The walls were littered with remains, broken weapons, bones, rusted swords, split shields. The heroes who had come here over the centuries, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They had all tried to kill the golem. They had all failed. A head-on attack doesn't work. 200 years of proof said so. He kept searching. In the far corner, he found a niche in the wall. A stone lay inside it, small as a palm, bearing the same symbol as the lock on the door. It glowed faintly, barely, but it glowed. He approached. The golem didn't react. He picked up the stone, heavy for its size, warm. The symbol pulsed in sync with the door. An artifact key. He understood immediately. The stone opens the door, but the golem stands between the stone and the door. He needed to know what triggered the golem. Movement, sound, presence, the stone itself. He threw a shard of broken sword across the cave. The metal clanged against the far wall. The golem didn't move. He threw a pebble directly at the golem's leg. The pebble bounced off stone. Still nothing. He stepped out from behind cover. 1 step, 2, 3. Walked slowly toward the door. The golem was motionless. He walked halfway across the cave. Nothing. Came within 10 steps. 5. Then the symbol on the golem's chest flashed. The golem came to life. Its head turned. Its arms rose. It was looking at his hand, at the keystone. The golem reacts to the key. He stepped back. The golem didn't follow, but it didn't return to sleep either. He retreated behind the ledge and set the stone on the ground. Waited. 3 minutes. 5. The golem slowly lowered its arms and dimmed back into stillness. He sat behind the ledge and worked the problem. The golem guards the door from whoever carries the key. Logical design. The usurper didn't want anyone reaching the priestess even with the correct key. But the golem reacts to the key itself. not to a person. So if the key goes to the door while he is somewhere else, no, that doesn't work. He has to insert it himself. He scanned the cave again, ceiling, walls, floor, and then he saw it. Cracks in the ceiling, deep, old cracks. Tons of rock hanging by a thread directly above the center of the cave. He looked at the cracks, then at the keystone, then at the golem. He made a plan. He returned to the tunnel and hauled back several large pieces of rock, one armload at a time. 2 hours of work. Then he gathered bones and broken spear shafts from the cave floor and lashed them together with rope, a crude lever, not elegant, but it worked. He positioned the stone fragments at the base of the wall beneath the ceiling cracks. The lever braced against the largest fragment. Press the lever, the fragment rams the wall. The wall cracks further, the ceiling comes down. If the golem is standing directly beneath it, he took the keystone and stepped out. The golem came alive immediately. He didn't walk toward the door. He walked toward the wall beneath the cracks. The golem took a step toward him. The cave shook. A second step, closer. He stood against the wall. The golem was almost on top of him. 3 meters, 2. He threw the keystone across the cave toward the door. The golem turned around. The key was now near the door. The golem walked toward it and stopped, directly beneath the cracks. He threw his entire weight onto the lever. For the first time in this body, his sheer heaviness was an advantage. The fragment slammed into the wall. The wall cracked. The ceiling groaned. Tons of stone crashed down on the golem. Dust swirled to the ceiling. The roar was deafening. He dropped to the floor and covered his head. When the dust settled, he raised his eyes. The golem lay beneath a pile of rubble. One arm twitched, then went still. The symbol on his chest went dark. He lay on the floor breathing. Then he stood up. He stepped over the debris, picked up the keystone by the door. His hands were shaking, but he held the stone steady and pressed it to the lock symbol. The symbols aligned. The stone flashed. The door shuddered and slid slowly open. Golden light spilled from the gap, warm, steady, nothing like the cold green glow of the cave. He stepped inside. The room was small and round, walls of smooth stone covered in runes, and in the center stood a pillar of light. Within the pillar, a woman, tall, dark hair to her shoulders, skin like earth after rain, eyes closed, hands pressed to her chest. She wasn't breathing, or breathing so slowly it was imperceptible. The mark on his wrist was burning. He approached the pillar and reached out his hand. The light burned his palm. Pain shot up his arm to his shoulder. He didn't pull back. A hostage negotiator doesn't pull back. He clenched his teeth and pressed harder. The pillar cracked like glass. Shards of light scattered across the room. The woman swayed, her eyes open, green, bright as young grass. She looked at the dirty, heavy vagrant before her and said one word. Her name, Terra. She had stood in that pillar of light for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of solitude. And the first thing she saw was a man with scraped hands and torn clothes who smelled of mud and effort. She swayed. Her legs wouldn't hold her. He stepped forward and offered his shoulder without a word. She leaned her weight against him, heavy, even for the stiff, cursed body. But he held her. She asked who he was. He told her he was the bearer of the seal, showed her the mark on his wrist with 5 links. Terra looked at the mark. Her eyes widened. She said she hadn't believed anyone would come, that heroes had come and perished. She'd heard their screams through the stone, century after century, and then the heroes stopped coming. He told her he wasn't a hero. He was an operator, and he had a job to get her and for others out. She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. The first link on his wrist flashed. Pain shot through his entire body, not like a blow, like a release, like someone had cut the rope that had been tightening around his chest for weeks. The pressure eased, not completely, for links still pressed down, but one was gone, and the difference was enormous. He drew a breath in, deep, for the first time in this body. The air reached the very bottom of his lungs. An interface flashed before him. Link removed. 1 out of 5. Skill acquired. Hand of the earth. He looked at his hands and clenched his fist. The fist closed completely. Fingers obeyed. Not perfectly, not like before, but 10 times better than an hour ago. He stood straighter. His back stopped aching. His joints went quiet. The body was still heavy and slow, but now it moved, not like a prison, like a body. He took a step, a firm one, without pain, then a second, a third. For the first time in his life, walking wasn't torture. Terra told him the seal had begun to release him, that with every freed priestess, he would come closer to his true form. One hostage free, for targets remaining, and he could finally clench his fist. Now they had to get out. The golem was destroyed, but the stonehound still patrolled the tunnels. He led the way back. Terra moved slowly. 1,000 years without movement had left her legs uncertain. He supported her, now he could. They moved from shadow to shadow, wall to wall, when they heard Hound panting ahead. He stopped her with a gesture. They pressed flat against the stone and waited. The Hound passed by without noticing them. 2 hours of careful movement, and they reached the crack. He squeezed through first. Easier now, his body obeyed better. Terra passed through without trouble, slender enough to slide free. Evening outside, the sunset painted the sky orange above the dead trees around the black mound. Terra stepped out into the open and stopped. She stood and looked at the sky. She hadn't seen the sky in 1,000 years. He stood beside her and said nothing. He knew this moment belonged to her, not to him. She stood there a long time. Then she turned to him, eyes shining, and said she was grateful, not for saving her, for coming, for the fact that someone had come. He nodded. They left Kirin and walked north for 2 days. He tested the new body constantly. With every passing hour, the difference became clearer. He could walk faster, carry weight, move for hours without stopping. Not like the special forces soldier from his past life, like a normal person. After the prison he had been living in, it felt like a superpower. He practiced Hand of Earth during every rest stop. He pressed his palm to the ground and concentrated. The earth trembled beneath his fingers. A stone pushed up from the soil, small at first, the size of a fist. He pushed harder. It grew to the size of a torso. He removed his hand. The rock stayed. He could move earth, raise stones, create walls, build traps from the terrain itself. For an operator trained to use landscape as a weapon, this was the most natural ability imaginable. Terra told him the skill would grow, that for now it was weak. The link had only just been established. In time, he would be able to move mountains. For now, a fist of stone. He said that was enough. On the 3rd day after Kirin, they reached Korton, the city where he had been a heap in a ditch, where guards had shoved him away from the gates. They approached. The guards stared. He was still large and heavy in frame, but he moved differently now. He stood straight. He walked with confidence. Beside him was a woman who radiated something the guards couldn't name. The guard, who had pushed him weeks ago, stepped forward and demanded to know who they were. He walked past without answering. The guard didn't stop him. Something in how he moved made the man keep quiet. In the city, he found a tavern and offered to unload a cart of heavy oak barrels in exchange for food and a room. The owner looked him over and agreed. He unloaded the barrels. Each weighed what 2 men usually shared. He lifted them with difficulty, but he lifted them. The tavern workers watched in silence. That evening, Terra sat quietly and he didn't press her. 1,000 years of loneliness can't be healed in a night. He lay on the straw floor and looked at the map in his head. For markers, the next western coast, the water priestess, Narita. 3 weeks through swamps and coastal lands that were worse with monsters than the south. He began to plan. He spent 3 mornings in the tavern's backyard training with Hand of Earth, lifting stones, moving them, forming walls, destroying walls, lifting again. Terra came out and watched. She said he used the gift of the earth like a soldier, not a mudge. He told her that was because he was a soldier, and a soldier trains with his weapon until it becomes an extension of his arm. By the end of the 3rd day, he could raise a stone wall half a meter high in under a second. He could thrust a stone spike from the ground precisely at a chosen point. He could collapse a section of earth, creating a pit trap on command. Not great power, but enough in the hands of an operator who knew how to use terrain. On the 4th day, Korton came alive with alarm, guards sprinting along the walls, townspeople diving into their homes. He climbed to the wall and saw them, a pack of creatures approaching from the south. Not stonehounds, larger, black, horn plates across their backs, 30 of them, maybe more. The guard captain was shouting orders. 10 guards on the walls, crossbows raised, hands shaking. The wall was low. These things would clear it in a single leap. He assessed the situation in 3 seconds. 30 creatures, 10 guards, wooden gates. The city falls in an hour. He climbed down and approached the gate from the inside. The captain saw him and bellowed for him to get out of the way, that he had no time for beggars. He didn't answer. He placed both hands flat on the ground. Hand of earth. The ground in front of the gate lurched. Stone crept upward from the soil. A wall, 3 meters high, 5 meters wide, rising directly in front of the city gate. He clenched his teeth. The skill drained him brutally, sweat pouring, vision narrowing, but the wall grew, layer by layer. The creatures hit it at full sprint and crashed against stone. The wall held. They began circling the edges. He raised some more sections on either side, lower, but enough to slow them down and channel the guards' fire. He dropped to one knee. His arms were shaking, but he held the walls. Terra stepped out from behind him and placed her hand on the ground beside his. The earth beneath the wall compacted. It grew harder, thicker. 1,000 years in captivity had weakened her, but even weakened, she tripled the strength of what he had built. The creatures did not get through. 20 minutes later, the last of them turned and fled back south. He sat on the ground, hands trembling, chest heaving. The city stood. The captain of the guard walked toward him slowly and stopped. He looked at the stone wall, then back at him. He asked who he was. He stood up and looked the captain in the eyes. He said that a week ago they had chased him away from these gates, called him filth, called him a heap in a ditch. He wasn't offended. They had seen what was in front of them. But that heap had risen, and standing beside him was the priestess this world had been waiting for across 1,000 years. There were for more of them, and he was going to retrieve them all. Silence, absolute silence, not a single word from the walls. He turned and walked toward the tavern. Terra walked beside him. Behind them, the stone wall stood like a monument to everything that had changed. The next morning they left Corton heading west, toward the coast, toward the second priestess. The road west crossed open plains. The grass was gray and sparse. The earth was dry. Trees were few and looked sick. The world was dying before his eyes. As they walked, Terra told him of the world as it had been before. Green forests stretching horizon to horizon, rivers clear as glass, cities full of people and trade and laughter. 5 priestesses at the heart of this world, each tending her own element. Terra the earth, Norita the water, Ignis fire, Saphira wind, Lumen light. Together they maintained the balance. Then the usurper came. He noticed something when Terra spoke that name. Not hatred, something closer to bitterness. He asked whether she had known the usurper before he sealed them away. Terra went silent for a long stretch. Then she said she had known him, that he was one of them, the 6th. Not a priestess, but a guardian, the one who watched over the balance between the 5 elements. He filed that away carefully, the 6th guardian, not an outsider, one of their own. That changed the entire picture. But Terra said no more. 1,000 years in a pillar of light had erased many memories. He didn't press. The information would come. It always did, if you knew how to wait. On the 5th day of travel, the swamps began. The land ahead wasn't flooded with water. It was flooded with something dark and viscous. The swamps stretched for dozens of kilometers. Locals bypassed them from the north, adding a week to any journey. He decided to go straight through. He had hand of earth. He could compact the ground beneath his feet, build stepping stones from the quicksand. They entered the swamps. He led the way, touching the ground ahead every few steps, solidifying a path for Terra to follow. Exhausting work. The skill drained his strength methodically. But he paced himself. Short bursts, compact a section, pass through, compact the next, pass through, rhythm, discipline. On the 3rd day in the swamps, they met a hunter, middle-aged man, lean, clothed in hide, spear in hand, Darin, who had lived in the swamps his whole life and knew every path and poison. He told them about the western dungeon without being asked much. The fishermen called it the Drowning Fortress. Ruins on the coastal rocks, half submerged. Water creatures emerged from it at night to drag fishermen off their boats. And something larger lived inside, a water serpent the length of a ship. It surfaced at high tide and guarded the ruins. He couldn't swim in this body, even with one link removed. He was still too heavy to survive open water, so he needed a way to reach the priestess without fighting the serpent in the water at all. Darin guided them through the worst of the swamps and wished them luck at the parting. He said he didn't believe they'd return. 7 days after leaving the swamps, they saw the coast, gray sea stretching to the horizon, waves shattering against black cliffs. And there it stood on the rocks, the Drowning Fortress, enormous ruins, half the walls already in the sea, upper floors jutting from the cliffs like broken teeth. He watched for an entire day, dawn to sunset, 40 water creatures patrolling the ruins, frog-like, man-sized, webbed paws, wide mouths full of teeth, probably more below the waterline. At high tide, the serpent surfaced. Darren had not exaggerated. Dark blue scales glistening in the last light, head like a crocodile, body as thick as a barrel. It coiled around the base of the fortress and went still, guarding. He stared at the serpent and weighed his options. Direct assault, impossible. 40 creatures plus the serpent. He needed a different battlefield entirely. He looked at the cliffs, at the ruins, at the water, and he began to see the plan. The fortress sat on rock. Rock was his territory. He couldn't fight the serpent in the water, but he could remove the water. He turned to Terra and asked if she could help him lift boulders, large enough to seal the breaches in the fortress's stone foundation. She considered it. Together, she said, yes, it was possible. He spent 2 nights on reconnaissance, circling the cliffs in the dark, mapping the 3 places where the sea flowed into the lower levels of the fortress. 3 breaches, seal all 3 and the lower levels would drain within hours. They began working at night when the creatures were less active, lifting stones from the cliffs, shaping them, moving them into position. First breach sealed overnight. By morning he could barely stand, but the gap was blocked, stone to meters thick. Second breach the following night. Terra took the bulk of the work this time, her stones fitting tighter, no gaps, no cracks. The third breach was the largest, 3 meters wide, carrying the majority of the sea's flow. They worked together until dawn. He lifted, she shaped and compacted. When the light came, all 3 breaches were sealed. They retreated to the hill and waited. The water level inside the fortress dropped, slowly, steadily. By noon, the lower levels were exposed. Wet black stone, seaweed. Dozens of water creatures thrashing on the rock, helpless as fish on a shore. Without water, they were slow, clumsy. Their webbed paws slipped on the wet stone. The serpent suffered worst of all, its massive body writhed against the exposed floor, trying to reach the sea. Stone barriers blocked every exit. It was trapped, on land, weakening with every passing minute. He waited another hour. Then he stood up and looked at Terra. She nodded. They moved toward the fortress. The water creatures tried to attack. He pulled stone spikes from the rock, precise, fast. The creatures were weak without water. The spikes hit cleanly. Terra hurled rocks from the walls. 10 minutes, and they had crossed the outer courtyard. The serpent lay in the central hall, even weakened, even sprawling. It was enormous and dangerous. It lunged without warning. He drove a spike into the floor directly in its path. The serpent hit it and recoiled. He didn't try to kill it. He built a cage. Stone pillars rising from the floor, one after another, each one narrowing the space the serpent could use. Terra added hers, thicker, stronger. The serpent darted between the pillars, with each new column. Fewer gaps remained. 5 minutes. The serpent was encased in a cage of stone, body still writhing, but the stone holding firm. He walked past it and down the staircase behind the main hall. Wet steps descending into the flooded dark. Below was a chamber identical to the one in the black mound. Round, runes on the walls. A pillar of light in the center. Within the pillar, a woman, small, fragile, silver-haired to her waist. Skin pale, almost transparent. Eyes closed. Her expression not pain, not peace, sadness, deep, bottomless sadness frozen on her face for 1,000 years. He approached the pillar. The mark burned. The second link pulsed. He reached out and touched the light. Pain again, but he already knew what it meant. The pillar cracked. Light scattered. The woman fell forward. He caught her. She was light as a child. Her eyes open, blue, bright as morning sky. She looked at him, then at Terra behind him. She said nothing. She looked the way someone looks when they have forgotten how to believe that help can come and cannot understand what is happening. Terra stepped forward and said her name gently, Narita. She said they were free, that he had brought them out. Narita watched, didn't react. He sat her down on the floor carefully and sat beside her. He didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't rush her. He simply waited, the way you wait with a rescued hostage who hasn't yet understood the nightmare is over. A minute, 5, 10. Narita blinked, looked at her hands, wiggled her fingers. Then she looked up at him and wept, quietly, silently, tears rolling down pale skin. 1,000 years of loneliness pouring out. He sat beside her and said nothing. The second link snapped. His body lightened again. Muscles responded sharper. His back straightened further. 2 out of 5. Skill acquired. Flow of healing. Something connected to water. Not destruction. Restoration. The hostages free. 3 targets remained. And for the first time, this body was beginning to feel like it belonged to him. Narita didn't speak for 3 days after her release. She followed him and Terra in silence, wide eyes touching everything. She stopped at every stream and dipped her fingers into the water. The water reacted, swirling around her touch, rising to meet her palm. He watched and did not interfere. 1,000 years without sensation needed time to be remembered. On the 4th day, she spoke in a voice that hadn't been used in far too long. She said she could feel all the water around her, in the earth, in the rivers, in the clouds, in their bodies. She said the water in this world was sick, poison. The springs were dying, and what remained had turned dirty. He asked if she could heal it. She paused. Then she said she could. Not all of it, not at once, but she could. She knelt by a roadside stream and placed both hands in the water. It darkened for a second, then grew clear. He scooped some up and drank, clean, fresh, the first clean water he had tasted in this world. They turned east now. The 3rd marker burned on the map, Ignis, Priestess of Fire, beyond the Ashfall Desert, the most dangerous road of all, desert teeming with fire lizards and sandworms. The heat alone could kill before they arrived. But first, the Central Plains, cities, people, and a problem he hadn't anticipated. The first city on the way, Vin, was larger than Cordon, higher walls, sharper guards. He was stopped at the gates. Did they have money? No. The guards said vagrants weren't permitted entry. He could have raised a stone from the earth to make an impression. He didn't. An operator doesn't show his hand unless he has to. He walked around to the market gates and offered a caravan approaching the city his help with an overturned cart. He lifted it single-handed. The caravan leader stared, then waved them through. Inside, he spent 3 days gathering information, loading, hauling, listening. The last group to attempt a straight crossing of the desert was 20 warriors, 50 years ago. They came back, mindless. One muttered about fire that lives in the sand. The other died from burns no one could see on his skin. Internal burns. Fire in the sand. Invisible flame. The dungeon was protected by the element itself. Without protection from the heat, they wouldn't last 2 days. He turned to Narita and asked if she could create a water shield. A thin film of moisture on their skin to cool their bodies in the heat. She said she could, but she needed water, a great deal of it. There was none in the desert. He calculated 100 kilometers across, 3 days, maybe for at his current pace. 50 liters minimum, 50 kilos of water, across sand. He would carry it himself. 2 days of preparation, 8 leather water bags filled to capacity, fabric for sun protection, dried meat, hard flatbread, burn ointment traded by Terra from a local herbalist who couldn't stop staring after she fixed his fence with a single touch. On the 5th day in Vin, they turned east. The desert didn't begin suddenly. It crept toward them, first just warm, then very hot, then unbearable. The sand was reddish and hot not from the sun, from within, something burning far beneath the surface. By morning of the 2nd day, the heat was scorching through thick leather soles. Narita activated her water shield. Cool film across all 3 of them. Relief like breathing underwater. But the water was burning away faster than he had anticipated. By evening of the 2nd day, 4 of 8 bags were gone, half the water at the halfway point. At night, something moved below the sand. Rhythmic vibrations, something large swimming through the desert like a fish in water. He gestured silently to Terra. She felt it and compacted the ground around their campsite. A solid stone circle 5 meters across. The sandworm passed by, didn't notice them on the stone island, or chose not to engage. On the morning of the 3rd day, they saw the dungeon, and it was nothing he had expected. Not a fortress, not a burial mound. A mountain, a black rock standing alone in the middle of the red desert, smoke rising from the summit. A volcano, lava streams creeping down its slopes, fire lizards the size of horses patrolling the base. 30 in view, more inside. Water was nearly gone. To skins, the shield was weakening. Terra was exhausted. No time for a siege. He needed a plan in hours, not days. He looked at the lava, at the water bags, and the answer hit him. Water meets lava, steam, explosion of force. A lava doused with water solidifies instantly into stone. He looked at Narita and asked if she could compress all remaining water into a single jet, aimed directly at the main lava flow at the mountain's entrance. She looked at the bags, looked at the lava, and for the first time since her release, she smiled. Barely, just the corner of her mouth. But it was a smile. She said she could. He broke it into 3 phrases. Narita hits the lava. Steam screen. Lizards blinded. Lava freezes to stone. He and Tara raise walls of solidified lava to create a corridor to the entrance. He goes inside fast. Finds the priestess. Gets out. Tara asked what he would do about the guardian inside. He said he'd decide when he saw it. Tara said that wasn't a plan. That was improvisation. He said the best operations are half plan and half improvisation. The main thing is knowing which half is which. They waited for dawn. Lizards were least active in the first light, huddled against the lava for warmth, sluggish. Narita stepped forward and opened all the water bags simultaneously. Water shot into the air, then flew as a single compressed spear toward the main lava flow. The explosion was like a cannon shot. Steam burst in every direction. The lava froze. A black crust 3 meters wide blocking the flow. The lizards screeched, blind, thrashing into each other. He and Tara struck simultaneously. The solidified lava was stone now, hot, rough, but stone. He raised a wall on the left. Tara raised one on the right. A corridor 2 meters wide leading straight to the mountain's entrance. Lizards battered the walls. He built them higher. Tara compacted them, sweat pouring. Tara turning pale. He ran. For the first time on this mission, he ran. Through the corridor of solidified lava, into the black opening in the rock, into the volcano. The heat hit like a wall. Inside the mountain was like an oven. The air burned his lungs. Narita's shield evaporated instantly. He felt his skin begin to char, but he ran. The tunnel led downward. He counted seconds, 5 minutes, maybe less, before the heat ended him. The tunnel opened into a hall, huge, ceiling lost in smoke and red glow. And there stood the guardian, not a golem, not a serpent, a man, or what had once been a man. Black metal armor with fire burning through every crack, flames where eyes should have been. A 2-handed sword, red hot, the fire knight, guardian of the 3rd dungeon. It turned his head, found him, stepped forward. The sword slashed air where he had been a moment ago. He rolled aside. His body obeyed. Not perfectly, but enough. Another strike, vertical. He stepped left. The sword melted the stone floor on impact. That blade would shatter any wall he raised. Hand of earth was useless for defense here. Only for attack. He drove a spike up through the floor beneath the knight's feet. It staggered but held. Another spike. Another. The knight shattered them all with the red-hot blade. 3 minutes left. Maybe less. The heat was eating him alive. He stopped attacking. Thought. Knight in armor. Fire burning through the cracks. Remove the armor. The fire disperses. Stone can't pierce that plate. But stone is not only spikes. Stone is pressure. He dropped to both knees and slammed both palms to the floor at once. The stone blocks rose simultaneously from opposite sides of the knight and drove inward. Maximum force. The knight braced his sword against one block. The blade began to melt the stone. But the stone kept pressing. He felt Tara outside the mountain sense his skill and add to it, amplifying the pressure from below. The stone vise tightened. The armor cracked. One fracture, then another. The breastplate burst open. Fire gushed from the crack, not like flame, like a scream, ancient, metallic, agonized. The night had been burning for 1,000 years, burning and guarding and never stopping. The vise tightened further. The armor split apart. The fire inside shot to the ceiling. The hall went white. He covered his face. Heat scorched his palms and forearms. Deep blistering burns. Then the fire went out. The night was gone. Empty armor lay on the floor, dark and dead. He was on his knees, burned severe, but alive. He stood up. Behind the guardian, a door, same symbol. He pressed his scorched palms directly against it. The skills plus fury plus a refusal to spend one more second in that heat. The stone cracked without a key. The door crumbled. Behind it, a pillar of light, orange, hot. A woman inside, tall, muscular, red hair like fire, dark skin, even sealed, even imprisoned. Her face held an expression of fury, as if 1,000 years hadn't touched it. Ignis, priestess of fire. He reached out with his burned hand and touched the pillar. 3 pains hit at once, the seal, the burns, the pillar's fire. He clenched his teeth so hard he nearly broke them. The pillar cracked, light scattered. Ignis opened her eyes, golden, bright as the sun. She looked at his scorched hands, his smoldering clothes, his blistered face. And she said he was either the bravest man she had ever seen or the most foolish. He replied that one did not preclude the other. Ignis stepped out of the pillar. Unlike Terra and Narita, she did not stagger. She stood firm. 1,000 years in a pillar of fire had hardened her, not weakened her. She had been a warrior before her imprisonment, and she remained one. She raised her hand. The fire in the hall walls flickered. The heat around him receded. She was drawing the heat from the air directly around him. It became bearable. He exhaled. The third link snapped. His body surged again, muscles tensing, bulk shedding another layer of invisible chain. He looked at his burned fist and clenched it. The fist was hard, powerful. A fighter's fist beneath the blistered skin. 3 hostages free, to remain. And for the first time in his life, he felt dangerous. They left the desert together, he and 3 priestesses. Moving through the cooled air Ignis shaped around them. The fire lizards retreated before her. She was not a guest in this desert. She was his mistress. Narita walked beside him and worked quietly at his burns with flow of healing. Cool water threading through his skin, pulling back the pain by degrees. Ignis watched him for 3 days before she spoke to him directly. She came forward without preamble and asked why he was doing this. Why get burned? Why risk everything? Why come at all? He said it was his job. She said the heroes who had come before also talked about duty. Then they died outside the dungeon. He asked how many had made it past the lizards to the dungeon entrance. She went quiet, then said none. They all died in the approach. He said that was the difference. They tried to fight through by force. He changed the rules of the fight. He stripped each battle of what he feared and filled it with what he controlled. Ignis looked at him for a long time, then said he spoke like a commander, but looked like a vagabond. He said appearance was the last thing worth examining. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. The 4th marker burned north, high in the Storm Spy Mountains. Zafira, priestess of the wind. Thin air, winds powerful enough to peel a man off a cliff face, and somewhere at the summit, a dungeon. They passed through the mountain town of Ridge Haven and bought warm clothes and climbing gear. Money was less of a problem now. Ignis melted several stones. Terra compressed them. The merchants in Ridge Haven didn't ask too many questions about the origin of gold nuggets. The ascent was different from anything that had come before. 3 removed links meant real climbing strength. He carved steps into rock where the trail disappeared. Ignis warmed the air so they didn't freeze overnight. Narita monitored everyone's condition, flow of healing easing altitude headaches, thinning blood for the thin air. Terra reinforced every stone underfoot, a team, each element filling a gap the others couldn't. On the 5th day of climbing, they entered the clouds, damp, cold, 0 visibility. He navigated by instinct and the pulse of the priestess's mark in his wrist, drawing him upward. On the 6th day, the wind found them. Not mountain wind, something alive, something intelligent. It came from every direction simultaneously, changing its angle every second, pushing them toward the cliff edge. He hammered climbing hooks into the rock and roped the group together. They moved as one body, step by step. Ignis tried to build a fire shield. The wind blew it out. Terra raised stone walls. The wind poured over them from above. This wind couldn't be stopped. It had to be timed. He spent hours flat against the rock, watching, counting, noting the direction of each gust. After 2 hours, he found the pattern. The wind rotated in a circle, left, front, right, back, above, 30 seconds each direction, with 2 seconds of calm between each shift. He explained it to the team. 2 seconds to move, then anchor, wait for the next window. Ignis said it was madness. He said madness had a better track record than caution. She smirked. They began. 2 steps, drive a hook, wait. 2 steps, drive a hook, wait. The wind howled and roared and clawed at them every time they stopped, but the windows were real. Hour by hour, meter by meter, they climbed above the wind belt, and then the wind stopped, completely, silence so sudden it was almost louder than the storm. Before them, a flat platform, perfectly level, as if cut with a blade, and at its center, a tower, slender, tall, white stone, no windows, the entrance at the very top, facing the sky. 30 meters of smooth vertical white stone with no cracks, no ledges, nothing to climb. He pressed his palms against it and activated Hand of Earth. The white stone didn't respond. Magical protection. He tried again. Nothing. Terra tried. Nothing. The simplest obstacle so far, and the most impossible. He sat and stared at the tower for a long time. Then he stopped looking at the tower and looked at the platform beneath it. The white stone of the platform was only half a meter thick. Beneath it, ordinary gray mountain rock. His rock. He didn't need to climb the tower. He needed to lift the earth up to meet it. He placed his hands on the platform and reached down past the white stone to the gray rock beneath. He began raising a pillar, not the tower, a separate column of gray stone rising beside it. Terra joined without a word, hands on the ground, adding her strength to his. The pillar grew. 5 meters, 10, 15. He was groaning from the effort, sweat blinding him. Narita placed both hands on their shoulders, flow of healing lifting the fatigue, buying them another few minutes of strength. 25 meters, 30. The gray stone pillar stood beside the tower at the exact height of the entrance. He carved steps into it and climbed, legs trembling, kept climbing. At the top, the tower's door. No lock, no symbol. He pushed it. It opened. Inside, wind, not howling, steady, upward flowing, and dozens of small tornadoes spinning in the space. Within each vortex, a translucent figure, human-shaped, wind spirits, not one guardian, dozens. The nearest vortex struck the wall beside him. The stone cracked from a single impact. He pulled back and thought, 3 seconds, 5, 10. Wind is powerful in open space. Wind in a crack is just a draft. Fill the tower with stone, leave only a passage to the priestess. The vortices will have nowhere to spin. He slammed both palms to the floor and drove gray stone up through the foundation. Stone filling the tower from inside, walls, corners, every gap between the whirlwinds. Sculpting a narrow corridor 1 meter wide from the door to the center. Terra from below added more. Narita threaded water through the cracks and froze it, cementing everything together. Ignis heated the stone from within. Hot stone, denser, harder. For skills, 3 priestesses and a bearer, 1 mechanism. He crawled through the corridor on his hands and knees, stone pressing from every side. The muffled howl of trapped spirits beyond the walls. The mark burned, the 4th link pulsed. He crawled toward it. The corridor ended at a 2 by 2 meter space in the center of the tower. A pillar of white light, and within it, a woman, short and sharp-faced, silver-white hair, an expression of defiance frozen on her face even in confinement. She looked as if she were laughing at whoever had dared to imprison her. And when Bogdan touched the pillar and the light shattered free, that is exactly what Zafira did.